Hi, Kickstarter.
Hello.
Welcome to a kind of a war game review of brand new game. You're on the Kickstarter page, so you know what this is already. This is Freedom, and it's come out from Phalanx Games. And it's a two-player, card-driven war game. We'll call it a war game.
Mm-hmm.
Although it's a war game, but it's got some really different elements to it. It's card-driven in a Twilight Struggle style, that kind of a card-driven
Tug
game.
and war, back and forth.
And it's about the Greek War of Independence in 1825. Now that might seem like quite a niche topic. Mm-hmm. I haven't ever played a game about this particular conflict, and we, the players, they play a lot of war games. But this was something that was very new. It was very refreshing. There was some history that was learned, which is something we find very important in games. And indeed, we turned to the internet to learn even more about the game, which is, again, something that I like my war games to inspire me to learn more, right? Mm-hmm. This game is played in kind of... There's two different aspects to the board. You have a tactical board where the Ottomans are laying siege to a city with a long Greek name, which we're going to read off of this piece of paper.
We're going to butcher it.
Okay.
Butcher it.
Because my apologies in advance. As far as I'm concerned, this is pronounced Messalongi.
Yep. I would agree with that. Okay. I would concur.
So, this is Ottoman Empire. They're basically... I think they're quelling a rebellion that was for insurgency for independence by native Greeks. And they have literally huge battle lines surrounding the city, which is on a coast, on a peninsula. And they are just trying to take the city, charge the walls, destroy the cannons, destroy the fortifications, and basically get in. And that's how the Ottoman player is going to win the game. And the Greek player, it's desperate defense. Mm-hmm. Trying to keep your cannon fire going, trying to pepper the units as they kind of come up to the wall so you can kill them, protecting your flanks and the kind of the bay and the lagoon behind you so you don't get like naval landings in the south. You don't want to get into that mess either, because that's another way the Ottoman can kind of really get in and win. The other thing you're doing is trying to balance your morale, which is affected by that, like fights, individual fights losses, you win and lose, kind of the losses you take. It's affected by the supplies of the food that you have. You start running out of food, your morale plummets, and for the Ottomans, they have to pay their mercenaries. If you don't pay your mercenaries, you lose. Troops just leave. They're not going to stick around and fight, and the Ottoman morale can go down that way as well.
Yeah. On
top of all of that, there's there's a separate board up here that has kind of the surrounding area kind of abstracted into, what is it?
Different regions of Greece.
And those you're vying for control over to gain different benefits. And those are all unique and not necessarily the same for both sides who has it.
So if one of those tiles gets flipped over, one side may be units for you, on the other side it might be a cannon and food for me.
Yes.
So it's really what is important to your struggle. That's what you're going to get from your side of those tiles.
And the core mechanics of this game, and we'll get into this a bit later, we'll kind of show you, it's card driven. So you have a hand of cards. Each card has a value that you can use to perform certain different actions which have costs. There's a play that explains that. Or you can use it for a written text event that will kind of break the normal rules of the game and allow you to do some really cool stuff.
If it's your card.
Right.
And if you're the Imperials, your cards are red cards, so you can use the events. If you're the Insurgents, the blue.
And you might have a hand of cards that has both of those. And so what you're trying to do is play the cards that help you the most, and trying to use the cards which would help the enemy in the least damaging possible time, try and mitigate some of those effects that might come up.
So if you've played card-driven games, a lot of times what happens is when events are played on your opposition's side, they'll go off if you use them for the ops. That's not the case here. What happens is that card goes to the discard, and then the opposition can decide on their turn, do they discard a card, typically discard a card of your opposition, so that it doesn't go off, to take that event. I liked that. I thought that was handled very well. A a little uniquely
Yes.
as compared to a lot of other card-driven games we've played, but I like the way it worked.
Yes, it means it's not quite as brutal and unforgiving
Right.
as games like Twilight Struggle
Where it
and
goes
Labyrinth.
off no matter
Yeah.
what you do.
Where you want to pull your hair out sometimes.
Yeah.
This game, you've got a bit of leeway. You can risk discarding a card to see, because they might be in a position where they're not going to use that.
Yep.
And so you can kind of get away with using enemy cards.
Yeah.
And so there's, again, layers and layers of strategy in how you play your cards, what you're doing with them, which part of the boards you're trying to affect, even which cards you use to do that.
Yeah.
And that's what I enjoyed about this game. For a game that is not particularly rules heavy, it had a lot of choices and put you in some pretty tough spots of like, how do I do this optimally?
Yeah.
And it's quite difficult. This is an easy game to learn, but very difficult to master.
Well, and it's asymmetric. So you each have generally the same actions, but you use them in different ways, and you get different amounts of dice. Almost all of the Imperial attacks gave 2 dice. So it's easier for them to attack and be successful. So that asymmetry really makes the game interesting, and it really makes it so you can learn 2 different ways to play the game. I played the Insurgents. I learned how to play them through our play, and I would love to now turn around and play the opposition, or to play the Insurgents immediately again one more time, because I feel like now, I missed that card. I didn't quite understand that. I understood how that worked. So really, you're going to get several plays out of this where you really are not going to be comfortable with how each side works until you play it several times. So I like that asymmetry. It just kept it interesting and made it, once again, it's an easy game to master. The rules aren't very heavy, but I think to play it well, it's going to take a couple of plays.
And I think that's the sign of good game design to me, is easy to pick it up, but gives a lot of rich learning. Each play is going to be different because you've got to try new things.
Yep.
A die roll here and there can affect the shape, quite literally, of a battlefield. And so then you're faced with a whole myriad of new choices that you make. And I think that's really a credit to the design that they've kind of come up with. Bringing what is, I'll be honest, an obscure conflict.
Very obscure.
But making it both very interesting and something that I really want to dig my teeth into more and more and more. So I that's a big credit to the design here. The artwork, this is
fantastic.
Pre-production, okay? So I'm going to show you this here in just a second. But for pre-production, it's wooden cubes, right? But even though they're just wooden cubes that we played with, they felt very different. My little red cubes, the way that they attacked, one cube rolls 2d8 to attack with. Very powerful. But that one red cube can only attack once.
Right.
You would have one blue cube, well, he only rolled 1d8. But he could attack 4 times in a row if you so chose. So,
and that's the way it's designed, because you have fewer defenders.
Right.
So if they could only fire one time, it would be really bad.
But I really enjoyed how even cubes on a board in area control felt like units that were different from different factions. That was really, really neat. So what we'll do is I'll show you the whole board and kind of some of the gameplay, what that's going to look like, and we'll wrap up with a few final thoughts. So this is kind of the board, and she's a pretty interesting one because she's divided up into a few different sections. So down here you've got the main tactical board, and you've got this city of Messalongi down here. You've got this main city, and these are the defensive walls, which are interspersed by these forts, which have a small blue outline. You can kind of see those. It's difficult to see it with this camera angle, I apologize. There's also the lagoon back here with these 3 islands, kind of naval defenses there. Now, the Ottoman Empire has a huge camp here, and they're basically, all their forces are kind of spreading out in lines and waves and moving up these columns and rows to try and storm the walls. You can't storm the walls until you break the walls down, and to do that, these little black cubes are cannons. You've got to fire your cannons to break the walls, run the troops up, try and kind of get yourself in there and get fighting. If the Ottoman player is able to possess one of the forts, or have units in the southern end of these beach areas. If they're able to hold on to those till the end of a full round, then they win the game. It's very difficult to do that, because once you get into the fortifications and walls, once you get into the city, the fighting is very bloody, and it's very easy to get to the killing. And just the amount of units you can move in and do that with is quite slow going, so you do have to have a little bit of luck on your side, as well as some very canny card play. The defending player is trying to build up forces to repair those walls. They're trying to garner supplies and outside support. That's this area, which will help flood more units, greater morale, more bread and food, more cannons into the city so that they can defend better. Furiously moving guys around to reinforce parts that might be weaker, trying to fend off any naval landings that might be happening. And on top of all that, both sides are trying to manage their morale. If your morale drops to 0, you just lose the will to fight, and you lose the game immediately. So those are really the two kind of end game, or the two decisive victory conditions. Either player will lose if their morale goes to 0, and the Greek player is going to lose if the Ottomans possess these kind of keys, one of these key spaces at the end of a full round. So outside of that, you're going to play through 6 turns in basically 2 different periods. You've got this early period where the fighting's a bit more even. Then the second period, the Ottomans they get some stronger units and some good help, but the siege has lasted a year. They're kind of getting lack of support from the government money, because they're frustrated that no progress has been made. You got to pay more money to your mercenaries. A lot of pressure gets put on the Ottomans to really get a decisive victory, although it is more difficult than it might seem. So that's kind of the objectives of the game, and like we said, the game is played through a card-driven system. So the cards are split into 2 periods, and that's something that I've always liked in games when they're able to do that. The cards are divided up into 2 different backs. This is the dawn of freedom right here, where it's kind of like sun rays coming in. And this kind of nighttime is the twilight of freedom. This is the second period. There's 50 cards in each period. You will play almost all of them, bar 2 or 3. So it is possible some of those really key cards that you need don't come out, and you kind of see some different stuff each time. A hand of cards. You'll have kind of 7 or 8, depending on... you have 8. That's really what it is. You're going to play 7 of them. Each card has a value in the top left-hand corner, and that is its kind of action point value. I play this one, I've got 2 action points. And there's a whole menu of actions that you can take with that. Or, alternatively, I can take this event. I can only take this event if this color, this is red, this is blue, if that's associated with my faction. So the Imperial player is the red player, the Greek player, the Insurgency, it's the blue player. Now, I, as the Imperial player, I want to play this. So my choice is, do I take 2 ops or do I take the event? I'm going to take the 2 ops. So the 2 ops, quite simply, I can do things like move or attack, or I can affect this kind of outside, it's called a support action. You can have this surrounding area, these support markers, I can affect these, which in turn will affect other aspects of the game. Or I can commit my 2 points to reserves so that I can do more expensive actions later on. Things like trying to call on the government, or to call for aid for more money. That costs more than 2 action points, it costs 3. So I've got to put some in reserves and then commit more next turn to be able to do that action. This action gets me money I desperately need to pay my mercenaries. If I don't pay my mercenaries, my morale drops. And I lose, literally, guys will walk off the battlefield. Terrible, you don't want to do that. Cannons are really important in this game. To build a cannon costs 4 action points. Well, that card only had 2, so I got to have 2 in reserve. So I put 2 in reserves. Then on my next turn, I've got to have a card that has 2 as well, and then I can use all of those points. This goes back to 0, and then I can build a cannon in my camp. So it comes from off board. There's a big supply of them. Put them in the camp, and then I can start moving my guys up. Now, to move, the Ottomans move differently from the insurgents. The Ottomans, the Imperial player, they're going to move 2 guys, 1 space. Quite literally into adjacent spaces. Or they can move 1 guy, 2 spaces. And you can kind of see here, these are divided up into rows. There's kind of these rings. This is 4, 5, 6, and 7. This row 4 is right up against the walls. That's when you're in musket and rifle fire range. So this guy here is subject to attacks from this guy and this guy. So ideally you don't want to just run 1 guy up. You don't want to do that. You're trying to move a couple of guys here. I've got 2 or 3 moves. I'm going to move 1 there. I'm going to move a couple of guys here. You're trying to move up in waves so you can spread out the attacks so you're not just getting hosed running guys up individually. Now, that's quite difficult to do. You've got 7 cards in a hand to do it with. Well, this is not a great hand. These are all 2s and 3s. There's some 4 cards and things like that, or there's events that make you move bunches of dudes. That's really how you're trying to really put pressure on the Greeks, by moving lots of guys up and making them commit to this forward defense. All the while, maybe you're trying to send some guys through the lagoon to land on the southern beaches. Wow, all of a sudden, they've got to try and put some guys down here to fend you off. Or if you're able to breach the walls, they kind of got to close their ranks. A lot of stuff you can do there. The Greeks, on the other hand, when they move, they have it's called a regroup action, and they can basically pick up any 1 guy and move it anywhere else on their walls, or in the south, or into these islands. The problem for the Greeks is a wall can only support so many people. They have a stacking limit of 2 units. And yeah, that's a lot when you're on a wall, but when you start taking a lot of wounds and guys, it can get pretty thinned out pretty quickly. So again, a lot of tough choices to be made when and where you do that. As these units get thinned out, say you lose a couple guys, you might have to train your civilians. You can literally take civilians, you spend action points to turn them into blue cubes, put them back on the walls, just throw spears in their hands, train them for a couple of weeks, put them out. Each of these turns is effectively 2 months, so the time scale allows you to do that realistically. Now, attacking is one of the really interesting parts of this game, because the units are asymmetric. Attacks are done with d8s. The Imperial player, here we'll just kind of set these up. The Imperial player has 2 units, and he's going to attack up this wall. Normally, attacking a wall costs, you need to roll an 8 to do it, which is very, very, that's the odds pretty much against you. So 1 unit's going to roll 2d8. For every 8 you roll, you do a hit. Oh, look, I do nothing. Then this guy, if I've got a second action point, so we played a 2 card to do that. Here we got a 2 card, we're going to play this. So 1 guy rolls 2 dice, that's 1 attack. This guy is going to roll 2 dice against this, also needing to roll 8s. Not very good. Now the important part of this is that if I had a third action, if I had played this for 3 actions, neither of these guys can shoot a second time. So you've got to do something else with your actions. And so how you put your units up and how many units you have is very important for the Imperial player. For the Greek player, when they do an attack, let's say we've got this guy in the fort right here. He's going to shoot, and he can shoot 3 times. Can shoot an unlimited amount of times. You figure it's a platoon or company, a group of men on top of all, they can kind of attack as many times as they want. So this guy, he's going to roll 1d8 one time. But the nice thing with here is I'm shooting down from a wall. These guys are out in the open. I hit these guys on a 6, 7, or 8. Roll a 7, we're going to kill a guy. Well, he can go again if he wants. 6, 7, or 8. That was a miss. I've got one more. Let's roll again. Oh, terrible rolls. But the important part with this is that one guy can hold off a lot of Imperials if you're in desperation mode. And that's a lot of what this game kind of becomes, especially towards the end when the ranks have been thinned. It's one guy making a heroic stand, or one guy, dies bravely and he takes out the enemy, and it's desperately racing to throw one more guy up to the front lines to help defend and roll multiple attacks. But again, the Imperial player's got to be much more canny in, I've got to bring multiple guys, because one guy, whilst he has a powerful attack, has to bring multiple guys to levy more attacks and use his action points to the greatest of their ability. One of the other amazing parts of this game is this little kind of support area board. You can kind of see there's these tokens over here, and each of these tokens has a different side. So for the red player, if they control this, it will gain 1 extra unit at the end of each turn. If the blue player controls it, they will gain 1 morale at the end of each turn. And I love that these are different for each faction in that way. It makes the game very engaging. This one is 1 blue unit. This one is 1 red unit. Some of them are a little bit similar. Some of the interesting stuff here, though, if we look at Padra, this provides 3 bread and 1 cannon to the Imperial player. But it provides 3 bread, 1 cannon, and 2 units to the Insurgent player. And the fight over this is fascinating, because the more you're doing this, the less you're doing this. And so there's a really fine tightrope to walk. Do I spend because it costs 2 action points to affect this board in any way. The Insurgent player plays 2 action points, and what they can do with that is they can either remove an enemy kind of support marker, if there is one, or if there isn't one, they can simply flip it, or if they control it, they can add one of their own markers. So these markers are just make it more difficult for the enemy to take that away from you. So if you can stack a bunch on some of these really important ones, you kind of protected for at least a couple of cards, couple of turns, where you don't have to necessarily worry about this as much. And some of the events affect this board very significant. And having good support can turn the tide of the war for one side or the other. Because if you can't get any food from this, your population's going to starve, your morale's going to plummet because there's not enough to eat, and the siege is going to break one way or the other. If the Ottomans can't get any food out of this, quite simply the troops won't fight. The morale plummets, we all just go home, because it was, the siege was mishandled and miscommanded terribly, and the logistics were awful. So, again, a good card-driven game, because there's really tight choices to make. My favorite part of the card system is that if the Imperial player plays a blue event, they can't use the event, but they can use this AP value. So, I'm the Imperial player, I do 2, I'm going to do 2 attacks. Boom, I do my attacks, great. This goes into the discard pile down here, great. Now, it's the Insurgent player's turn. What they can do is they can just discard a card from their hand to activate this ability if they want to. Remove 1 civilian from the city. Get 1 Insurgent unit. That, the event is the event, but what it does is, it means I can use this event that the other player was trying to kind of hide from me. And what's nice is that I can pay for that event with a card from my enemy. And it's not like this is kind of a trumping system. This card can't be played. If I bought this event with an enemy card, the enemy can't then buy this event back. You can't just get into kind of chain doing that. So I like to put it underneath. I get to pay for that event, and I spent a really bad card to do that. So that's kind of your equivalent of something like the space race that you might have seen in other games. A way to get rid of cards, and you get a cool bonus that was kind of being hidden from you by being in the enemy hand. It's hard to get that to go, and sometimes these events are not opportune, so you don't want to do that. But there's some choices to be made. This might be a pointless event for the Insurgent player, but they might be holding an unbelievably powerful Ottoman card that, destroys some of my cannons. It is worth me wasting my turn to get this boring rubbish event, at least situationally, just to get that card out of my hand. And so even those small layers of strategy with the card play is fascinating. I play one card, enemy plays another card, I play one card, you do that for 7 cards, that's your round. At the end of the round, you collect these bonuses, you feed your population, the Ottoman's going to pay their mercenaries as well, and you just move on to the next round. Halfway through the game, you go to that other second deck of cards. The Ottomans, the Imperial player gets all these green allied units. They just get more, they move differently. They're better cannoneers, so the cannons get bonuses because they really commit to trying to end this war. And that's really a lot of what this game is it's a great history in a really tight back and forth game. Trying to manage all these different aspects to make it what you want to do, but it's really hard to do everything to the highest efficiency. So you've got a lot of tough choices to make, and the game is a really, really interesting one as you're trying to do waves of attacks, struggle over support, feed everyone, keep your morale up, as well as kind of do the killing decisive blow where and when you can to really put the enemy on the back front one way or the other. So what we'll do is wrap up with a few final thoughts here. That was basically a lot of how the game plays. So that was a look at everything. For me, this was a really fun game. Mm-hmm. This takes about 3 hours to play, though. Yeah,
we played it, and we had read the rules before, but we were reading them as we were going. And the rules need a little work.
Right, and again, pre-production.
They need to be fine-tuned. But yeah, it's going to take you anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes a round, and there are 6 rounds.
Yeah.
The game can be over well before that.
Yes, and that's if it goes poorly. You play the whole game. There's instant win conditions that we talked about. If you can do that, you can end the game much, much shorter.
Yeah. So one of the questions I think I have that I want answered from you, your opinion, obviously this is an obscure topic from history. Did you get that feeling of being an imperial power going up against a smaller, underfunded, cut off defender? Did you get that feel of the siege from the mechanics, the gameplay, the cards even?
Absolutely, I did.
Okay. Why? What do you feel contributed to that?
So I had...
Because I think it did a very good job at that.
Yes. So I think it had... I've had a huge array of forces.
A ton. And you had a lot.
But it was really... because it's so many, it's hard to move them all with your limited actions to get them all to... Because if you could line up 20 dudes in a line and attack, the game would be very easy for me, right? But it's really hard to do that because you have to concentrate on some of the other things, the ancillary parts of the game. So moving those was hard, but when I could get into combat, I felt like my guys were very, very good.
Yep.
Now, so it felt like big guy, little guy defending with great heart. I don't know what sets my guys apart as being Ottomans themselves.
Right.
Other than some of the card flavor and the text.
Yep.
But it's having the little green ally guys come in and they're better cannoneers, and that was neat.
Yeah, that was interesting.
But I did a great job of giving you the onus is on me and this huge field army to go and take this fortress, and the fortress is
it's hard because the defenders can rebuild those walls, although it's very intense to do that. It takes a lot of resources. Yes. So it's a matter of I can rebuild those walls, but in place of doing that, I lose a lot of ability to do other actions that I really would like to do, attacking you or getting some other supplies from events or other things like that. I really liked being the defender, and you asked me the question, was I bored?
Yes, because to me, in games where one player just sits there and defends behind walls,
not as interactive.
A lot of games, that's not very fun.
But I think in this case, I really felt engaged. I had to really play off what you did. So if you decided to attack the walls a lot, man, I had to repair a lot. If you decided to go around the backside and try to get onto the beaches, I really had to make sure I had men back there, move them strategically around so that I wouldn't be caught off guard. And that's what ended up happening. And ultimately, you won the game. It was kind of funny. The other thing we talk about in good design is how close was the final score. So the other thing I really liked about the siege concept was the food, trying to figure out how I was going to obtain food, because I was cut off. And it was funny, we were looking on the internet, historically, this siege took about a year. Mm-hmm. And ultimately what happened, the Greeks ran out of food and decided that they were going to make a break for it. And they were slaughtered.
Yes.
Probably because they were tired and probably had disease and were sick and et cetera, et cetera.
Frankly, outmatched.
Outmatched. But I felt that pressure a lot. I had to worry about food. And there were only a few ways to get food. And I think literally the second in the fourth round, I lost the ability to gain food, because you really locked down those food spots with the support action. And that started to worry me. But then I really liked how they addressed that by putting in cards that allowed me to get a couple food.
Yeah, like 3 food smugglers and things like that getting you food.
So that was nice. I also liked the civilian side, although I really hated those civilians. They did very little for me. I could train them and then turn them into soldiers.
But you still have to feed them.
But I had to feed them, even if they were soldiers or civilians. And I never felt like I didn't have enough guys. What I probably would have done differently is I might have put several more guys on the beaches on the backside, just as that extra line of defense. So I loved that siege aspect. I really liked the cards. There's a lot of historiosity to the cards. They use real names of the leaders, those involved.
And you get little bits of, like, 2 lines of text.
Flavor.
A little bit of describing the actual people in the events as well.
And I just thought it was well put together. I thought it was interesting. And we love the games like Twilight Struggle and other card-driven games where it's back and forth. It's a tug of war. And we always use the statement, managing the pain. Labyrinth is one of our favorite games, and you're really trying to manage the destructive power of those
that
events.
Game is particularly egregious as well.
But you're trying to do the same thing here, just in a different, I think, more simplified way.
And
I like that.
It was less painful as well.
It was.
Which I enjoyed, and I think that's going to make this game much more accessible to people.
It's not as deep, so it's fine.
But it's not... I'm doing less killing myself with these cards that I just have to
right.
It's, I've got to go a few cards myself, and I'm like, this one might go off if you choose to do that, but that person's got to sacrifice things to do that too. So
the other thing I always like about these cards is you can look at the certain cards and you can say, oh, Alexander cannot take that action because he doesn't have guys in the 4th row. So I'd be like, oh, I can play that with impunity, knowing you're not going to be able to take advantage of that. But there were times where, man, you had 3 or 4 guys in the front. I didn't want to play some of those cards because it gave you like free attacks or had you move guys from your camp all the way up, which typically would have taken you 2 or 3 turns. So I like that. I love managing that pain. I love managing that damage, mitigating the damage. But production value, beautiful. I mean, just for a pre-production copy, fantastic art, great colors, really nice.
If pre-production is this good, usually your end product's going to be excellent.
Yep.
Phalanx has a phenomenal track record of great-looking games, right?
Yeah, U-Boat.
Hamilcar, U-Boat, newer games that they put out are just top-notch components qualities. And I hope that there's a lot more in the Kickstarter as well.
Yeah.
I would be interested to see if you could make a solo module out of this game as well. If you had a deck of cards for solo AI, that's possible.
I think that would be great because a game like this really lends itself to a solo.
It would be really
variant.
easy to make that. Yeah.
It could remind me of Pavlov's House, which is another solo siege type game that came out last year that I really liked. I think it could use some of the similar mechanics to decide what the Ottomans do and when they do it. I think that would work well. I'd like to see that.
If
If you're doing the
both
siege,
sides, really,
absolutely.
and that's because But with that being said, for a siege game that is 2-player, I was very impressed that it wasn't one-sided.
Right,
and I think
it went down to the very end.
Right, but you weren't just sat there like,
no,
I defend, I'm staying defense. Yep. There was actually stuff for you to do, and quite a lot of it.
Yeah,
stringing your defense together, repairing everything, doing the support.
And the plea for government aid, that really saved my bacon at the end. Literally, I got supplies and was able to kind of live one more round. But there's a lot of little neat elements, almost games within a game that are included in this. And I like that. I think this is a very good design.
Right. And even on top of that, games within a game, I didn't feel like they were tacked on.
No.
I felt like they were well integrated.
Yep.
Like there's games
they had
where
a meaningful
you're like,
impact.
we just put this in here, and we just put this in here. This is all, everything synergizes really well, and you have to worry about them all. It's not just like, this other thing just for fun.
Yeah.
Like everything works off of each other, and the card play really helps to kind of facilitate all of that.
Well, and my guess about the mini games within the game is they were put there to overcome a problem. There was probably an issue they ran up against in the playtesting, and they're like, well, let's try this. And that's how they figured out how to address that concern. I haven't seen a designer diary or done an interview, but my guess is that's where a lot of these, they felt they needed a plea to the government to get aid, and they needed some other ways to
how to
address
get them those big chunk of supplies at the end there. But yeah, all in all, this was a really fun game to play.
Agreed.
This comes with good recommendations from us. A nice war game, I guess. I know it's a war game, there's combat and dice rolling, but it's really simple. It's kind of area movement and control, but that great card-driven mechanic that makes the rest of this engine go is very fun to do. It's easy to learn, and you're going to get bumper production value from Phalanx.
And I think they did a great job of the theme too. It really, to me, is interwoven throughout the gameplay, and I think it does what it was intended to do. Make you feel like you're either a sieging side or you're being besieged.
Right.
And I think they did a good job.
And learned a bit of history whilst we were having fun. And that's like a big plus for me.
I didn't like the way I lost, though. Gonna be honest.
Well,
the last card, you moved a unit, and it was over. And I'm like, oh!
I had saved that big move.
Oh, bull, you had saved that. Like, yeah, you probably had saved it. That's why I didn't want to go first.
Yes.
Going first is not really all it's cracked up to be.
Not necessarily.
You want to be the last one to be able to either gain one of these or take that final action to... And I knew once I lost that, I'm like, oh, that's going to come back to bite me, and it did. But yeah, great game. Great game.
That's just it. It's there's back and forth, struggles, tug of war in almost every individual aspect of this game.
Yeah.
You have to worry about your morale, got to worry about your food, got to worry about your money, got to worry about your support, got to worry about your troops, got to worry about your cards.
Yeah, and lots to worry about. Lots of worries.
And that is great in the game. You can't let anything go, and it's just engaging the whole way through.
Yep, agreed.
So I appreciate you guys tuning in. We've been thePlayersaid.com. My name's Alexander.
And I'm Grant.
And this is Freedom from Phalanx Games.